Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane's live stream, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. When you want me to start talking. Check, check, check. Check, 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 test, test, test. That work? No? Check, check, check. Okay, we'll try it again here. How's that looking, Todd? Good. Todd Milne is in the room with me. Otherwise, it's just the two of us. So pardon our opening technical difficulties. But good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane's live stream. The only way most of us are able to attend these days, but we're glad you are. We're still joining together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, and please say it with me, create community, find meaning, and work for justice. I want to begin, as always, even though this is not like always, by welcoming all that you bring with you today to this different kind of service for us, this virtual service. All of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences are all much appreciated and welcome. And this, of course, is true for those who are a usual part of our service, as well as those who might be joining us in our live stream today. Welcome to one and all. These are going to be very abbreviated services for the next few weeks until we know that we can safely begin meeting as a community in our building again. And then on those occasions where I'm not able to be present, we will suggest a archived service from the past. So hopefully we can all adjust to that for a bit. By abbreviated services, I mean we're not going to have special music. There are copyright issues, so our license allows us to perform copyrighted songs, but we're not able to play the professional or original recordings of those. So we're not going to have music during the services, but it will be an opportunity for me to make any kind of announcements necessary, kindle our candles of care, light a virtual chalice, if you will, in our minds, as well as to reflect upon a variety of topics. So I do want to make one announcement today, and I know this is usually a part where we get to greet each other and hug each other and shake hands, and we're not able to do that, but I do hope that it helps you to know that there are many of us sharing this same moment at a time that is very difficult for all of us as well. So we are a community, and even if we can't see each other and be with each other physically, I hope you can feel each other's presence in this shared experience this morning. I have one announcement, and that is for volunteers. The Spokane Alliance is asking for volunteers to be trained as Spokane Regional Health District Community Health Volunteers to check in over the phone with patients who tested positive with COVID-19 and are in their homes. The volunteer will call these community members every day by phone to document worsening symptoms as well as the person's oxygen levels. All volunteers will be supported by an on-call clinician available by phone 24/7 and will be trained for the role. Volunteers will be asked to be responsible for 10 patients at a time and commit to a week of volunteering minimum. This should be around an hour a day in call time. The goals are to support people with COVID-19 who are at home and reduce some of the burden on the healthcare system. You can contact Mary Lou Johnson if you are interested in doing this, and we will be putting out other information with her contact information on it through email. So, with that said, we're not going to actually light our physical chalice this morning, which represents our community, but we are going to say the words to our chalice lighting and light a virtual chalice. You can picture the one that we light here each Sunday, or just picture the light and container of our individuality and community in your own way. So we now light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. We're also going to kindle our candles of care, virtually kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds. And I do have two requests that I'd like to specifically think of at this time. One for our church member, Jacob Johns, whose father passed away last week. Please keep Jacob and his family in your thoughts. And also a candle for Kelly and Michelle Rasmussen, whose son Oliver just became an official member of their family. Congratulations to all, and welcome to Oliver Kelly Rasmussen. And for those who are here regularly and hear that wonderful little baby cooing in the background of our services, that's Oliver. And Oliver is now an official part of their family and an official part of our church family. So welcome to one and all. Also have one here that we were wanting to do last week, but we did not have services. And this is for Cindy Fine, who is having, or was having, eye surgery. I guess she had it this week. So she also would appreciate our good and healing thoughts. So let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others. And you're welcome to say their names aloud at home if you'd like, to whisper them in silence, to think of them silently in your heads. But let's just take a minute of quiet while we do that. those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in the world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. For a reading this morning, I found the lyrics from one of John Denver's songs that just felt appropriate to me this morning. This is the lyrics to a song called Gravel on the Ground. If our lives could lie before us like a straight and narrow highway, so that we could see forever, long before we took the ride, we would never look to heaven, make a wish, or climb a mountain, because we'd always know the answer to what's on the other side. But life ain't no easy freeway, just some gravel on the ground. You pay for every mile you go, and you spread some dust around. But we all have destinations, and the dust will settle down. This life ain't no easy freeway, just some gravel on the ground. So let's walk the road together. Who knows what we'll find tomorrow? Maybe good times, maybe sorrow. Both are waiting round the bend. Given time, two hearts discover what they'll feel in for each other, and the best will end up lovers, and the least will make a friend. But life ain't no easy freeway, just some gravel on the ground. You pay for every mile you go, and you spread some dust around. But we all have destinations, and the dust will settle down. This life ain't no easy freeway, just some gravel on the ground. I know this morning Rabbi Tamar from Temple Beth Shalom was originally scheduled to be our speaker, something that we've been working to make happen for some time, and doubly sorry under the circumstances that she's not able to be here with us today, understandably so, but we look forward to having her at another time, and also are wishing the best for her and her community as they deal with what we're all dealing with. Most of my sermons during this time will be of usual length or perhaps even briefer, but I'm going to take a bit more time this morning because I wanted to talk with you about the COVID-19 virus. I feel like it's important to do, and I've spent a lot of time trying to learn as much as I can this week. So my sermon is entitled, Our Finest Hour, a Response to COVID-19. And as a minister and a preacher who you will recall follows the shamanic tradition, I consider it my job to enter into altered states of consciousness in search of wisdom that I can then bring back and share with my community to help others expand their own consciousnesses. My consciousness expanding experiences aren't achieved by ingesting peyote, ayahuasca, or magic mushrooms, but by studying science, philosophy, and other disciplines that help me open my mind and see things from a new point of view. Shamans are also responsible for helping to heal the sick and to explain the cause of their ailments. Traditionally, they've spoken about diseases in terms of invisible poison darts sent by some unknown enemy. Given our shamanic ancestors didn't have the perspective of modern science and medicine, that isn't a bad way to describe viruses. The invisible dart threatening us today, of course, is the coronavirus, or a coronavirus. And we're fortunate to have the vantage of science and medicine and technology to help us better understand it and deal with it. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of information overload, mixed messages, conspiracy theories, and a 24-hour news cycle that has trouble getting away from speculation, propaganda, political spin, and fear. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to attend much of a 3-day online summit on the coronavirus this past week, and have been able to gain a lot of reliable information from some of the top medical experts in the field, some of who are on the front line of the global effort to help end this pandemic. Some of what I have to share is going to be technical and detailed. So I'm going to invite you to grab a pen and a piece of paper if you'd like. We're going to take about a minute of silent meditation while you do that. Okay. I want to begin by extending my deep and sincerest gratitude to Singularity University for having responded to the coronavirus crisis by assembling the COVID-19 virtual summit this past week, from which the information I'll share with you comes this morning. This morning comes, I should say. Unlike any other sermon I've ever given, I almost unabashedly am plagiarizing what I'm going to say from the summit. Fortunately, it's information that SU wants shared with as many people as possible, so I appreciate their gift to us all. And that's the shamanic journey I took this week, the consciousness-expanding netherworld I entered to learn as much as I could about the virus, from which this point on I will refer to as COVID-19, which stands for COVID virus disease of 2019. Having attended Singularity University and as a member of its community, there's no group on earth that I would trust more for acquiring the accurate and practical kind of information all of us want and need right now. I'm as proud as I am humbled to be part of SU and have much gratitude for the gift that they have given the world this week. When the summit started on Monday morning, more than 20,000 people from around the world logged in, a crowd so unexpected that it initially crashed the site. I'm even more appreciative that SU is openly sharing the recorded COVID-19 summit with the entire world on YouTube. So after our service is over this morning, our staff is going to send out a church-wide email with a link to the various sessions so that you can watch them for yourselves if you choose. Obviously, 3 days of information is too much to distill down to just a few minutes, so I'm going to concentrate mostly on what we know about the virus, at least according to those experts who spoke at the summit, and what we can do to help keep it from spreading or catching COVID-19 ourselves. I'll then conclude by talking a bit about some of the positive things happening and the important role that each of us plays in getting all of us through this. So let's start with what we know about the virus itself. The COVID-19 summit began with a presentation by Dr. Divya Chander, chair of Singularity University's Neuroscience Department. She tells us the virus is zoonotic, meaning it was passed to us through another species. One explanation for this is that global warming and the consequential destruction of habitats is causing us to come into closer contact with animals we normally wouldn't, meaning our immune systems haven't built up a resistance to some of the bugs that they carry. From this, some have further inferred the COVID-19 is only an harbinger of things to come. I wouldn't be so sure. In fact, I don't believe that's true, and I'll talk more about that later. The virus itself is described as having tiny spikes on its surface, or coronas, from the Latin word for crown, from which all coronaviruses are named. These spikes easily attach to the membranes of our cells. In fact, there's both an enzyme atop our cell membranes that break the virus's protein up so that it can be more easily absorbed, and as luck would have it, a receptor that's shaped kind of like a lacrosse stick that's just perfect for catching those bits of broken virus or protein to help absorb them into the cell. And so in this sense, our own cells are working against us. Since most of the cells with this particular enzyme are in our lungs, it explains why the disease manifests as respiratory symptoms. A virus, of course, is comprised of RNA, meaning it's essentially a form of nucleic acid, and has no DNA. To reproduce, it needs to invade cells with DNA. COVID-19 then can be likened to those bird hitchhiker seeds that attach to an animal's fur or to a human's socks, then get carried to other locations where they drop, multiply exponentially, and then latch onto other animals or socks. In this way, a single carrier can be responsible for spreading the plant to thousands of others. A COVID-19 carrier affects an average about 2.3 people, which after 5 cycles adds up to about 350 people. So you can understand why some didn't take it very seriously until the number of cases suddenly exploded. Given that it can take up to 15 days, between 12 and 16 actually, before a host even knows one is sick, compared to SARS, another coronavirus, which takes only 3 days, one can cause a lot of damage to one infected person. Between when it was first noticed on January 22nd, 2019 and February 25th, its spread was slow enough that few worried about it. January 22nd, 2020 and February 25th, its spread was slow enough that few worried about it. Between February 25th and March 14th, there were close to 89,000 confirmed cases. And I'm not going to go much into its questionable death rate because we simply don't know how many have actually been infected with it. Most of the time, COVID-19 is more severe than the common cold, a seasonal flu, and chickenpox, but less severe by far than SARS, MERS, Ebola, bird flu, and smallpox. It's as contagious as SARS, Spanish flu, and bird flu, and the common cold, but less contagious than polio, chickenpox, and measles. Helps give you a bit of an idea of what we're dealing with. I'll turn now to what I've learned about the virus's most common symptoms. This might be a good place to take notes. COVID-19's most common symptoms are a fever and a cough. These symptoms are sometimes, but not commonly, accompanied by shortness of breath, a sore throat, fatigue, headache, other aches and pains, and rarely, that's rarely, by a stuffy nose or diarrhea. Sneezing is not a symptom of COVID-19, although it could spread it if you project particulates into the air, but sneezing is not itself a symptom of COVID-19. So bottom line is really watch out for fever and coughs. And if you are feeling some of these other symptoms, but not a fever and cough, One self-test is to try holding your breath for about 10 seconds and see if your lungs are fatigued at all or stressed. We don't want to overload testing centers at this point because there still are only a number of limited tests. But if you do have a fever or cough accompanied by shortness of breath, definitely call your doctor. The data on its level of severity remains questionable since testing has come late and we don't have an idea how many are or have been infected by the disease. According to a very recent report coming from the mainland China's Disease Control and Prevention Center, based on 44,672 confirmed cases, it's a pretty good sampling, 80.9% had mild to flu-like symptoms. 80.9%, most of them had mild to flu-like symptoms. 13.8% had severe symptoms, meaning they were hospitalized, and 4.7% were in critical condition. We've also heard older people, or those with already compromised health or immune issues, are most at risk with severe symptoms. But this is not exclusively true. Young people and children have had severe reactions, which in some cases have resulted in death. In the Netherlands, more than half of those COVID-19 patients placed in ICU have been under age 50, more than half. Now I want to turn to prevention and begin by stressing that the most important thing any of us can do, as I'm sure you've heard, is social distancing and isolation. Again, like a bird seed sticking to our clothes, getting dropped off elsewhere, and multiplying into hundreds of seeds, COVID-19 will spread exponentially and be unstoppable if we don't prioritize this most important step. As Dr. Chander noted, during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, the disease spread far worse in those communities that held parades to support the war effort at the time than it did in those that canceled the parades to help reverse the spread. So it's important to cancel our gatherings as much as we would prefer not to help stop this. Contagious diseases, like the rest of the world, are not flat. By not recognizing the exponential nature of their spread, which looks like a sudden explosion to us, the U.S. government put us all behind the curveball by not enacting the Emergency Use Authorizations Act sooner than it did. Thinking exponentially would have prevented this. Thinking flat is why we're at where we're at. So our job now as responsible human beings and neighbors is to help actually make the world flat, in this case, to flatten that exponential spread of COVID-19 by isolating and distancing ourselves, which we also know works exponentially to stop it. Those communities that began doing so on day 21 of the pandemic had 40% more cases than those who began doing so just one day before on day 20. So it makes a big difference. In China, the first to begin social isolating and distancing, the number of new cases being reported has slowed to a trickle. During the summit, Dr. Nell Watson on the Coronavirus Task Force gave a lot of other practical advice. First of all, she told us how it spreads. By droplets and aerosols, by coming into contact with the mucous membrane, right? Eyes, nose, mouth, and perhaps through fecal matter. So when using the bathroom, remember to put the lid down first before flushing to help prevent those water particulates from getting up into the air. And of course, wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water and avoid using public restrooms. Difficult as it is, it's also important to avoid touching your face, particularly your eyes, nose, and mouth, especially if you've not washed your hands for a while after being out in public. Wearing masks in public is more important for those who are infected because they are the ones who can unintentionally leave droplets or expel aerosol particulates by coughing or sneezing. Given the long incubation of the illness before symptoms show up, however, wearing a mask when we have to go out in public is probably a good idea for any of us, just in case we are carriers and don't realize it yet. So get your pens ready because I'm going to go through a litany of other recommendations that Dr. Watson suggests. Okay, so when washing your hands, use soap and water rather than hand sanitizer, which can dry or crack our skin, making it easier for viruses to get in. You can use lotion, hand lotion, to help prevent this. Don't shake hands, obviously. Nobody will think you're rude at this point. Use something else like a pen to push buttons when you're out in public, those on elevators, swipe machines, automated tellers, those sort of things. Regularly disinfect your devices, your smartphones and your tablets with alcohol or Clorox wipes. Keep fit and active at home. It's important for a strong immune system. So even if you can't go to the gym, find other ways to keep fit and active, to exercise. They're recommending you avoid going to the dentist at this time. Avoid haircuts and beauticians, so hopefully long hair is going to come back in style. So long hair, but short nails. It's important to keep your nails trimmed because they can hold a lot of contagions beneath them if they're not trimmed well. It helps to get airflow through our homes and buildings and cars and taxis by rolling down the window. If you have to have meetings, weather's getting nice, meet outdoors. Increase humidity can help reduce germs and viruses. And take walks, but when you do, stay 6 feet away from others. One thing you can do to help keep from going stir-crazy is have a picnic. Obviously take extra precautions around food handling and whatnot, but being out in the open air and eating is a good thing to do to get you out of the house. She also recommends making a red zone, if you will, near an entryway of your home to store potentially contaminated things. So let's say you want to kick your shoes off there and don't put those back on until you have to go out again. Or you get a package delivered and you want to leave it sit there for 2 or 3 days before opening it, or anything else that you might bring in that you worry might have the contagion on it. Okay, some shopping tips from Dr. Watson. Try to go shopping when you think it might be less busy at the store. Take and use disposable bags. I know we don't like using disposable bags these days, but in this case, if you've been stuffing away some of those disposable plastic bags and want to take those to the store with you so you can bring your groceries home and discard them, probably a good idea at this point. And of course, wipe down any grocery carts with wipes. They should have those in the store. I went into one store yesterday and there was actually an employee wiping the handle down and passing the cart to everyone who came in. One thing you could do is have your bag in one hand and keep your other hand in your pocket. And that kind of assures that you're not unintentionally touching things and then touching your face, if you will, while you're out and about. And if you can, go with contactless payment, using your smartphone to pay for things automatically without having to come into contact with the keypads, that's a good idea. And then if you buy fresh produce, Dr. Watson is recommending that you don't put it in the refrigerator. Rather, wash it off and let it sit out on the counter. See, I just touched my face, but not my mucous membrane, so that was better than nothing. But wash it off and maybe set it aside. If you put it in the refrigerator, of course, it could just really help preserve any kind of contaminants. All right, don't lick stamps or envelopes. If you go to restaurants, if you can find a restaurant that's open, eat outdoors. Use your own pen when you go out into public. Take 10 micrograms of vitamin D daily is one recommendation. The word's still out on vitamin C, but it can't hurt, so if you want to take vitamin C, that's a good idea too. Here in the Northwest, we don't get enough vitamin D as it is because the sun is at a low arc in the sky, so vitamin D helps with your immune system, as does good sleep. So try to do your best to sleep well to help keep a healthy immunity system. I know it's got to be hard for parents who maybe have to still work and you have the kids at home, but Dr. Watson makes a really good point. Under normal circumstances, it might be convenient to ask grandparents to watch the kids, but not a good idea at this time due to the level of severity that tends to impact older adults more so than younger. If you know that you're well, there is going to be a blood shortage because of this crisis. So if you're young and healthy in particular and can donate blood, it would be appreciated. And then spring is sprung, and what a great time to grow food. If you want to have some really fast-growing, healthy sources of iron that you don't have to get at the grocery store, Dr. Watson reminds us that things like sprouts and spinach can grow very fast at home. So that's something to think of as well. Okay, so those are the tips for prevention. Now I want to shift to some positive news about all of this. Much of it thanks to Peter Diamandis, Dr. Peter Diamandis, a co-founder of Singularity University, who sent an email out on Wednesday containing fact-checked updates. So this past Monday, Moderna Inc. began stage 1 clinical trials of a new promising vaccine that's being tested on 45 healthy adults, actually in Seattle. Also this past week, China announced that it's having so few cases that it's been able to shut down the last of its temporary hospitals. That's a good sign because that's sort of ground zero for this. Apple feels so confident that it has actually reopened all 42 of its retail stores in China. The number of new cases in South Korea, who's also handled this, a nation that's also handled this well, continues to drop each day. Medical professionals in India have discovered current drugs that are successful in treating the disease. So there's a lot of current drugs that we're being able to repurpose that are actually very helpful for this. Believe it or not, Viagra is actually very good for opening up lungs that are under stress. So that's a new purpose or use for that. So research at the Erasmus Medical Center say they've discovered an antibody against COVID-19. It still has to be tested, which could take months, but they've discovered an antibody for it. Scientists in Israel are working fast to develop a vaccine and antibodies against the virus. Canadian scientists have been able to isolate the virus for testing treatments and vaccines. And the San Diego biotech company Arcturus Therapeutics is also developing a COVID-19 vaccine in collaboration with Duke University and National University of Singapore. So lots of and really hundreds of people and organizations involved in doing this, but just wanted you to see how much progress is being made or has been made already towards finding a vaccine to vaccinate us against it. And getting the virus at a ripe old age isn't necessarily a death sentence. There was really good news. Just ask the 103-year-old woman in China who made a full recovery after being hospitalized with it for more than 6 days. And a lot of that is because we're finding out how we're finding new treatments for it. So that's good news. Past experience over the past days and weeks has meant that people who have severe symptoms could very well die from it. That's going to become more and more less likely, even if we don't have a vaccine, because we are finding adequate treatments to help people get over it, even if they're manifesting severe treatment. So that's another bit of good news. The Metro Health Medical Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, has actually developed a test that gives results in only 2 hours rather than in days. So we're going to be able to find out much more easily if we are infected or not with COVID-19. So this is just some of the good news that is going on right now all over the world that we're likely to miss hearing about in some of the mainstream headlines. One of the worries we often hear is, again, that this is the new normal. I don't believe this is so. While it's true that the arrogance and ignorance of some of our world leaders, I won't mention any names, caused them to miss the obvious warning signs of this pandemic, just as the captain of the Titanic missed multiple opportunities to avoid hitting that fatal iceberg that sunk his unsinkable ship. But the rest of us aren't going to let such a disaster happen again. In fact, in both the short and long term, this is going to make us stronger, especially when it comes to dealing with viruses and other potential pandemics. Those government offices responsible for preventing such an event that have been financially starved in recent years will now become fat with the support they need. The response to COVID-19 itself is already leading to innovative thinking. Imagine a vaccine that can immunize us against all forms of viruses, coronas or otherwise. Imagine a time when it's not possible to run out of the medical equipment necessary to deal with pandemics or epidemics because we simply 3D print whatever parts we need. But we don't have to imagine. These things are already happening even as we speak in places like Italy, where there were unavailable critical ventilator parts that they were able to manufacture instantly on the fly through 3D printers. And there are currently more than a dozen medical companies with revolutionary COVID-19 medications in stage 1 trials. Some of these are based on traditional methods of looking at the antibodies in the blood serums of those who have recovered to develop vaccines they can then inject others with. But there's a novel company in the Bay Area that's found a way to bioprint virus fragments to generate an immune response that could be made immediately available to millions of people. And this technology will fight the virus right at the receptor of our cell membranes before it has a chance to enter and destroy them. The tech for home testing ourselves for COVID-19 on our smartphones, as well as many other conditions, already exist and is sure to be a wave of the future. Affordable instant medical diagnostics, ultrasounds, urine analysis, EKG, MRI, CT scans at home and on our smartphones for pennies all exist and are all coming online. MIT researchers recently announced an AI algorithm that has successfully discovered a new drug for curing antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Telehealth services are also going to boom as a result of this, enabling us all to interact with medical professionals from home without being exposed to other diseases in medical waiting rooms. So this is going to cause us to rethink how we do medicine in general in many ways. And it's going to become more affordable in the process because most of it's going to be done with devices that we own in our own homes. There's a smartphone app in Australia that can listen, or from Australia, I should say, that can listen to a child's cough and determine if it's caused by croup, asthma, pneumonia, or a lower respiratory infection. Easy adjustment should also make it capable of detecting a COVID-19 cough. New DNA vaccine technologies will enable our bodies to produce the antigens we need to fight diseases far faster than traditional injections of the antigens themselves. Moderna Therapeutics, which began testing that vaccine in clinical trials on Monday, is developing messenger RNA that similarly transforms our own immune systems into a vaccine-producing factory. So we're coming up with stronger, better, smarter, more savvy ways to deal with these viruses to begin with in ways that we've never been able to do before. Researchers are also working on ways to vaccinate us against the parts of the coronavirus that don't mutate. Right? It's possible that, we know that it's mutated since it left China. Some suspect it may have already mutated into two different versions of the illness, one worse than the other. So the parts that don't mutate are namely those spikes or crowns for which it is named. So to create something that will vaccinate us against the crowns of any mutation will immunize us against all forms of the virus for good. So instead of getting a flu shot and ending up with a mutated form of it anyway, we could be immunized against all flus, just as we are against contracting the chickenpox or the measles. It's going to be a while for these technologies, before these technologies are ready for widespread use, some sooner than others, maybe as long as a year for a vaccine, but there are lots of people working tirelessly to make them happen. I know we are in an unprecedentedly difficult time, but I hope you will not despair and that you can take heart knowing the situation won't last forever and we aren't going to let it become our new normal. We aren't. Too many good people working on it out there, and quite honestly, too many greedy people who don't want to see the economy ever tank like this again. Not that you have to be greedy not to want the economy to tank, but it's very costly. People have a lot of motives for making sure this doesn't happen in the future. I hope you'll also take heart knowing that something remarkable has happened during these past 2 weeks. For the first time in human history, human civilization has come together as one people, one species, to fight a common enemy. Something that hasn't even happened with the threat of global warming. In a statement this week, Dr. Peter Diamandis said, "While this global threat is real and frightening, I find hope in the fact that we have every mind on the planet focused on one issue. I can't remember a time when we have been this unified as a human species against one entity. We have thousands of scientists, pharma companies, physicians, laboratories, and hospitals focused intently on COVID-19. That level of unified brainpower is incredibly powerful and unprecedented. There are tens of thousands of experiments going on in parallel, testing different treatments, drugs, and drug combinations. I have absolute confidence that this level of focus and diligence will translate to a speedy response and timely solution. To everyone who has been personally affected by this disease, I feel your pain. The world is in a very chaotic place at this moment in history, but I also want to ensure that you all keep your mindset in check. I also want you to be cautious of the pandemic of fear spreading in the midst of this threat. Should be cautious? Yes. Should you follow your local guidelines? Yes. But also know that we will get through this and come out stronger than ever before." In his closing remarks during the summit, Dr. Daniel Kraft, Faculty Chair of Medicine at SU, reminded us of the words spoken by Gene Kranz, the lead director of NASA's Apollo 13 mission. When the lunar module's oxygen tank failed and the astronauts were in danger of never coming home, he overheard some saying, this is NASA's worst disaster ever. "With all due respect," Krantz responded, "I believe this is going to be our finest hour. And it was. Let's take inspiration from these words. Don't worry about who's calling the shots in the White House or Congress or anywhere else. This is an opportunity for our entire species to be at its best, beginning with each one of us being at our best. Don't let the boredom of isolation keep you from being at yours. The opposite of boredom is purpose. Make this time mean something by doing what you can to make a difference now, when your family, your neighbors, and the world need you most. In this vein, I'll close with the inspirational words of Dr. Nell Watson, who provided us that long list of do's and don'ts that I cited earlier. It falls upon each of us to step up towards public leadership in our own way. Maybe we're helping to nurse people. Maybe we're looking after vulnerable people in our society. Maybe we are distilling information. There's so much of it out there. We need to make sure that we have good information and formulate it in ways that people can understand and be educated from it. Some of you can listen to other people. You can be a friend. You can help people to stay in a good mental frame. And maybe when you're not feeling well, they can help to pick you up as well. Find a way to give something. Find a way to champion human excellence and decency. This is the work. This is the war work. This is God's work, if you will. The spotlight of history shines upon all of us today. What will you bring to humanity's finest hour? Thank you, my friends. Be well, be healthy, be happy.